Okay, I want you to be aware of annual ryegrass. If you've ever golfed in the South or such as Georgia, South Carolina, St. George, Las Vegas in December and January and wondered how they keep green turf, they top dress their fescue or Bermuda grass with annual rye. This is called a winter annual. It grows through the winter in the warmer areas of the United States and it dies. When it dies, the other turf will come back and take over, and that's how they can keep green turf for 12 months out of the year. We're too cold here for it to overwinter, and you don't want to put this in your grass because it can cause problems. If you see lawn patch type mixes for sale, try to make sure that this is minimal in there or non-existent, because it can cause problems, because it'll come up and grow really well for 2 or 3 months and then it dies. And if they say that mix was a third or half annual rye, you're going to be right back in the same boat. Okay, creeping bentgrass. Does anybody here have a putting green in their yard? Okay, fabulous. 5 or 6 years ago, 10 years ago, when I worked at J&J Nursery, for a while, for a 2 or 3 year period, a lot of the landscapers we worked with decided it'd be a great idea to put a putting green in their backyard as a demonstration on what they could do for clients, because they would use their yards as part of their business and they would take them to the formal part and the informal and the waterfall, and the putting green was an option. And to do a putting green, you have to do a certain soil profile where you're using certain sands and other soils, and then you put this bent grass down. Well, the mower to mow that putting green is over $1,000. And that doesn't include the maintenance of sharpening the blades. It has to be mowed every morning. The other problems with keeping creeping bent grass that is very aggressive, it easily outcompetes Kentucky bluegrass, and it's also very disease prone. So it's just a bucket of fun to try to maintain on a homeowner basis. And so after 2 or 3 years, most of these landscapers tore it out and put AstroTurf down just because it was such a maintenance nightmare. Golf courses are better suited to take care of it because that's what they do. And keep in mind that our home lawns are not golf courses, and they have specific equipment and training to deal with such things that we don't have. And a staff. Yeah, I mean, once your kids are grown, you don't have a staff anymore. All right, zoysia grass. I want to talk about a few that I see advertised very commonly. In February and March, we start getting spring fever. Zoysia grass is oftentimes advertised as a miracle grass that grows almost anywhere. It establishes, it requires low mowing, and it'll solve all your needs. Well, zoysia grass is barely cold hardy in northern Utah. It'll be green from the 1st of June till about mid-September, and then it browns out. And it is very slow to establish, and it's just not a good turf. It's better suited for areas like St. George or the South. So the advertisement I see looks like this in the paper. Sometimes you'll see something similar online or in magazines. Avoid it. Okay? Canada green. This is another one I've seen sporadically come and go, but it is very common. This is pretty much a mix of whatever crappy varieties they could find to put in their mix for that particular year. They'll put a little bit of whatever in with it, and of course the first year or two it grows like gangbusters. That's what turfgrass does, and then it peters out. And so they've got their testimonials of people that grew it and say, within 2.5 weeks I had turf. They should do it 5 years after the fact and see what people think, because it's not good. So, and you also pay a lot of money for it. The other one I've been seeing lately, Grassology. This is actually run by some hucksters that if you order this online or call, they're able to trick you into ordering faux diamond necklaces and earrings, faux leather seat covers, and whatever else they have in addition to your grass. I paid $20 for this at Target, and the grass seed in there, if I would have gone to Granite, I would have barely paid $3 a pound for it. There was 3 pounds, so I paid double or triple what I should have. I wanted it for this presentation, and so the grass in there is more of pasture type stuff. Let's see if the projector has resolution here a little better. Oh wow, Mike's projector is better than mine. Creeping fescue, that's okay, not great. Hard fescue, tall fescue, pasture grasses. You'll pay a lot of money to spray out of your lawn. Sheep fescue, another pasture grass, chewings red fescue, other crop seed, and who knows what else. So they've pretty much mixed very inexpensive red fescue with pasture grass, and they're selling it as a turf that's drought hardy and requires little mowing. All right, so just in summary, soil testing, you want to know your soil type before you do anything. Temperatures, irrigate according to how hot it is and your soil type. Make sure your system's efficient. Look at it. Don't just walk away and check it once a summer. Now, when you're seeding, you can do a little bit of a mulch. Peat moss is very good for this. If you're just doing small areas, if you get a handful of peat moss, you can rub your hands together and just kind of sprinkle it over the seed. If you're doing a whole yard, you can rent a peat moss, a roller from rental companies for 20 or 30 bucks. You just throw the bale in there and you push it and it'll put down the right amount for your seed. So just keep that in mind. And that will help reduce the amount of irrigation you need. Okay? As you plant your seed, don't allow the soil to dry out, but don't create a swamp. So you may have to turn your sprinklers on anywhere from 1 to 5 times a day for just a few minutes at a time to keep that soil evenly moist, to minimize your puddling. Once it germinates, though, there we go. Once it germinates, you can train it to slowly require less and less water. So once that grass starts to pop up, you might water 1 time a day. Then once most of it is up, you could maybe back off to every other day. So your end goal would be only to irrigate once or twice a week so that the water penetrates about a foot deep on each irrigation, then you leave it alone. Another question I commonly get is, what do I do with all the weeds that germinate with my grass? They're going to. Once you have mowed twice, most lawn weed killers state on the label that you can spray the dandelions and other weeds out and the lawn will be fine. So my caveat here is it needs to be below 85 degrees because weed be gone type products, when they're applied at temperatures above 85, volatilize into the air, and whatever that mist or that vapor runs into, it will damage any other broadleaf plants. Now the damage is usually temporary, but it's good just to avoid it. Okay, weedy grasses, you're pretty much just going to have to hand dig or let the bluegrass or whatever grass you planted outcompete. If you maintain it within a couple of years, most of those will be outcompeted. Turf maintenance, fertilization, irrigation, mowing, aeration, and thatch. I'm often asked, what type of fertilizer should I use for my lawn? Which one's the best? I don't know. How am I supposed to know? Until you test your soil, I'm just guessing. Because as we talk about this, our soil oftentimes has adequate levels of phosphorus and potassium. And so what I want to do here is explain what's in the fertilizer for just a few minutes. We didn't do this in soil, so I threw it in here. So on a mix of 16-16-8, which by law has to be on the package, that secret code is really not a secret code, and it tells you that by weight, it's 16% nitrogen, 16% P2O5, and 8% K2O. Now the P2O5 and K2O are just commonly referred to as phosphorus and potassium, or P and K. And so N, P, and K are the 3 things. And so if you get into a garden center and someone's talking 100 miles an hour, like, well, this one has 16% N, 16% P, 8% K. That's what those numbers mean. An easy way to remember what they are for is if you can remember the saying up, down, all around. The first number, nitrogen, is for upgrowth. The second number, phosphorus, is for root growth. And the third number, potassium, is for all-around health. Potassium is involved in many different reactions in the plant. It acts as a catalyst and other things, and it's just very important. So if I had a bag, a 50-pound bag of nitrogen, or a 50-pound bag of fertilizer, and it was a 16 on the front, what it would tell me is there's 8 pounds of actual nitrogen in that bag. Now, if we added this up and we had another 16 pounds of P2O5 and 8 pounds of K2O, that doesn't add up to 50. What is in there are other elements and molecules that bind those together, and it makes it so an actual blend. And so they're not putting fillers or marshmallows or something in there. It's just everything that's involved with the fertilizer to get it together. So here's our soil test right here, and it's the same one I saw before, the pH 7.64, but if you notice, the phosphorus is high. So that tells us we can apply a fertilizer with 0 phosphorus. The soil has plenty. The potassium is adequate, and so you could probably get away with a fertilizer with no potassium, so that leaves you with just nitrogen. So if adequate P and K are present, nitrogen is all you need. So a bag of 20.500 at a place like IFA is probably $16 to $20 for enough to do 10,000 square feet. That same bag of, say, a 20-5-10 that has all the numbers might be 30 or 32. And so because you tested your soil, you saved $12 on the bag of fertilizer off the top, and you can just apply it and your grass will be perfectly fine. You don't need to use the Cadillac fertilizers in general to have a really healthy lawn. Now the other option on the nitrogen is 4600. Now remember, this is the percent of nitrogen. So this bag of 50 pounds will do 10,000 square feet. This will do a ½ acre. So you can apply that in the middle of the summer, but you had better be careful you don't overapply. So those are the two least expensive forms of nitrogen commonly available. Okay, so soil release fertilizer. You can purchase straight nitrogen in soil release form. There's generally 2 types available from places like IFA or Steve Regan or some of the local garden centers. Sulfur-coated urea, you can generally get about a 2-month feed out of. Which is what this does is it slows down the release so that your grass greens up, but you're not mowing 3 or 4 times a week. The other, poly-coated urea, so release is even slower, and so you can get up to 3 months out of and you might even say polysulfur coated, so that 3-month threshold right there on the release of nitrogen. So those are out there, and you can find them if you look just with nitrogen and you're not getting all the other stuff in there.
What do they run?
Oh, you're going to pay more for that, but you're getting a lot longer feed. So for fertilizers, oftentimes if you go to a store or a farm store, they will advertise a package where you buy the 4 bags of fertilizer, they'll throw in some weed killer or whatever, and you just take them home, you look at your calendar, and you go, oh my gosh, it's Mother's Day, I need to put down the next application. That's fine, but if you want to be a little adventurous, you can just buy the straight nitrogen, probably save 20 or 30%, and get the same results because your lawn probably doesn't need the P and K and the fertilizer. Okay, now I wanted to talk about iron. A lot of higher end fertilizers put up to 5 or 7% iron in there, and people feel like it greens up their lawn. Sometimes it can. Now if your pH is at 8 or below, your turfgrass has the ability to get enough iron out of the soil as long as it's being irrigated correctly. Turfgrass has these little molecules called siderophores that are very, very able at pulling iron out of the soil, much more able than our trees and shrubs. And so anything below pH 8, you generally don't need iron. Now there's a few exceptions, but if there's iron in there, you're not harming anything by using it. But say you use a straight iron product that goes on your lawn, oftentimes they'll put a small amount, say 3 or 4% nitrogen in there, and it may not state it on the label. If you see green up from an iron product, it very well could have been from that little dose of nitrogen that you gave it, not the iron. Now, I'm not saying that that's true for everything, but if your lawn's a little yellow, I would try nitrogen first, and if that doesn't work, maybe iron is the problem, but okay. All right, liquids. A lot of turf companies, application companies will apply a liquid fertilizer 4 or 5 times a year. They're very fast acting. They absorb through the leaves and the roots. Generally, they're putting down urea. There may be some other nutrients in there too, but feed grade urea, which is a flaked urea, is very water soluble, and they just apply it at the correct rate and kind of move on. Now, a liquid fertilizer generally doesn't give you more than a month or so of nutrient feed. Now you can buy systems, they're called fertigation systems, that you can hook right up to your sprinkling system that will give a very small dose of nitrogen to your lawn on every application. It's actually pretty neat. They're a little more expensive, and it's almost like you're miracle growing your lawn once a week. But it's just dosing right through your sprinkling system. So you can purchase those. Companies like Sprinkler World, Sprinkler Supply, Dirk's Plumbing will carry those systems if you're interested. Okay, organic blends. Golf courses use a product called milorganite, which is an organic fertilizer, on their putting greens to melt the snow off because it's dark in color, but it has about an 11% nitrogen value. Milorganite is pretty much human poo that's been sterilized and pelletized. People are like, oh, gross, but we put cow manure on our gardens all the time. This is a lot more highly regulated. So if you see milorganite, it's out there. Fish emulsion. Has anybody ever used fish emulsion? Yeah, your yard probably smelled like a fish cannery for several days. All the neighborhood cats are kind of scratching around looking for the fish. Okay, humate. Does anybody use humate? If you're using humate, what it is highly decomposed or highly broken down organic matter. It's almost like charcoal or coal. And it's pelletized, so you can apply it. You put it on your lawn, and it will introduce some organic matter into your lawn. It will help in certain situations break down thatch layers. It breaks down, it forms what are called humic and fulvic acids, which in certain situations can help break down thatch. Otherwise, it's probably not doing you a lot of good. Every once in a while, companies will put some nitrogen with it so you get a little bit of a green up. But if I had to make the decision between fertilizer and humate, I'm going to veer toward fertilizer every time if I need it. So this is kind of a specialty product that's useful in some situations, not all. I actually had to do a lot of research on this when I was in school, and of my literature review, about a third of the studies, for whatever it was used for, said they saw a positive benefit. A third of the studies found no effect, and a third found a negative impact on what they were studying. And so it's just out there on whether it's any good or not. And so all I can say in certain situations, yes, but don't count on it being a miracle. Fertilizer schedule, this is in your handout. I just wanted to put it up here. This schedule is based on a use schedule instead of a calendar schedule. And this is kind of what I wish the garden centers would hand out, but yet you're not going to sell as much fertilizer sometimes if you use this one. And so as I mentioned earlier, if the only time your lawn gets any traffic is when you mow it, you can get away with 1 or 2 fertilizations a year, and it'll be fine because it's not having to repair itself. And then you've got your medium use, which most of our lawns would fall into, which is 3 applications. And then heavily used, which would be kids playing football every day, frequent garden parties, football type stuff. Then 4 applications, and maybe even 5, would be warranted, but we're fertilizing according to how much our grass is used. Okay, when I lived in Logan, on 3rd South, I lived in an apartment there for a while, and I was watching a teenager fertilize his lawn, and he was in a big hurry and using a drop spreader. This is the week after he fertilized, and the fertilizer, where it hit, did a bang-up job. And so if he would have used a broadcast spreader, his dad would have never known what kind of job he did. The broadcast spreader works so well in masking errors because it flings the fertilizer out in a less uniform pattern. What you're going to do is fertilize at half the rate and go in 2 directions, 2 opposite directions, so that, or one direction and go perpendicular, so that if you do make an error, you've got another chance to hit that at least with some fertilizer. A broadcast fertilizer is what I'd use for grass seed, or a handheld broadcaster fine too. So some things I've just noticed over time. This might look like animal spots or a disease, but the gentleman that was applying this fertilizer had a hole in the bottom of the bag and he didn't know it, and this is every time he refilled, it made a new mark. You can see here where he dragged the bag off the lawn. Okay, now, what do I do if my lawn's brown? I have a miracle cure for brown lawns. This is the exact same lawn, a half hour later. What did I do? I painted it. There's turf colorant. It's basically water-based latex paint formulated to be safe for turf. You can walk into IFA or Steve Regan and buy a quart of it. It'll do a couple thousand square feet for around $20. My wife, when I go for work meetings, I'm usually gone for 7 or 8 days, and she's not an outdoor person. So my lawn starts to brown out, and just being who I am and my job, I can't have that. So I wait till dark, and I go out and spray paint the sucker. I have no qualms, I'll admit it, but it gives me 2 or 3 weeks before it wears out to get my lawn back in order, and it works. This is very commonly used on golf courses. I've been to the Augusta National. The Masters Tournament is coming up. That is not, I mean, you have thousands of people trampling that grass. You think it looks pristine all the time? They're spray painting the heck out of that and putting sod down in high traffic areas, and they're very carefully doing their TV angles so that you don't see the high traffic areas. But it's very common in the golf course industry to use turf colorant. And you can use it as a homeowner. If you have a wedding coming up and your wife's going to kick you out of the house because the lawn's brown, here's your solution. All right, so irrigation, this is a little bit off here for Utah County. It's about a ½ inch more than what's up here. So in the middle of the summer, mid-June to late August, about 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches of water a week to keep your lawn green. All right, how often do I water? So slopes, sandy soil, or clay, like hard pan clay, you're going to have to water more often with less water. Now on a slope, the obvious reason is you're trying to prevent the water from washing. Sand is so well drained that if you put a lot of water down, there's no reason to flush it 24 inches deep on your lawn. And so you're going to water more often because that water is going to penetrate very quickly down 6 inches to a foot. Now on a loamy soil, less often, probably once or twice a week on an average system, a ½ hour to 45 minutes per application. If you're doing it twice, if you're doing it once, an hour to an hour and a half. Now the reason you water less frequent or more frequently on clay like you do sand, clay doesn't absorb water very quickly. And so in some situations you may have to use your program feature on your sprinkler clock. Water for 10 minutes, shut it down for an hour, water for 10 minutes, shut it down for an hour, and hit it again so that the water penetrates in and doesn't just flow off. All right, this is in Kansas City, Missouri. This was just mowed. I was driving to the airport in a taxi cab, took this out the window. Why is it 3 inches long and freshly mowed? Go ahead. It's hot there. They actually have less available water to irrigate than we do. For an average yard, if you were to water in Kansas City, like we do here, your bill would be $350 to $400 on a quarter-acre lot. And so they don't have the water. And so this is fescue, which is a little more drought hardy. And so they cut it long, and if it gets drought stressed, they just let it brown out because they don't have the money to water it. But again, and I'll show you a picture, I'll forward to it right now, and this just demonstrates the longer the top, the longer the roots. All right, so avoid daily shallow irrigation if you can. It promotes shallow roots, excessive thatch, diseases and pests, and wastes a lot of water. And then the deep, infrequent irrigation lengthens roots and prevents diseases and pests and conserves water. So those are pretty obvious statements. One other thing I wanted to point out on this slide right here, this is what I would call a landscape design error, because there's flower bed here, flower bed there, and you have one option on mowing and they overwater, and so they've developed tire marks in their turf. Well, the first thing I would do is just take that out, bust the cement out, redo the curbing, and just turn it into flower bed and be done with it.